Hello, hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser, and this week my guest is Lisa Roulette. I found her scrolling through TikTok, and every video she posted, it resonated with me. It touched my soul. It sparked interest. It got me curious, and so I messaged her. I said, you need to be on my podcast. And I love meeting people this way because everything is synchronicity, as a synchronicity in it. And I truly believe in things happen for a reason. And so I'm so thankful to have you here. Tell us about who you are and what you do so that my audience can get to know you.
Yeah, so many people know me on social media as the Ascension Guide. And I spent a large portion of my healing career coaching other people on how to heal so that they could expand their consciousness. And it really started very early on with helping women heal from trauma bonds after narcissistic abuse so that they could build self-worth and ultimately find a happy, healthy relationship that thrives. So over that time, as you probably know, as doing the coaching work that you do, you're not just a coach, you're also a student. Right. You're also the client in some way, and you evolve and you learn. And, so my evolution as a healer in business has been absolutely just fascinating. I've loved every piece of it. I've done one-on-one work, and I've gone all the way up through creating classes and courses and speaking and all of that stuff. And at the end of 2022, I had this sort of come to Lisa meeting where I had this sort of identity crisis, because in gaining a following on social media, I ran across a lot of people that are doing similar work to me. Mm-hmm. And what I was seeing was that they're not building sustainable businesses. And my whole perspective on the movement from the third dimension into the fifth dimension is that healers are going to take over the world. Spiritual business owners are going to take over the world, but we're not going to do that unless we start to build sustainable businesses. So in my sort of identity crisis, I had to decide, do I continue on as a healing coach, or do I become a coach to healers? And it was a really painful decision, but I decided to go with the latter. And now I'm coaching healers on how to build sustainable businesses that are built to scale so that they don't have to go back to work for a soul robbing job, and they can come do the work that they came here to do.
Yeah.
So that's my evolutionary journey in a nutshell. But I'm happy to talk about
Let's go back to the beginning of your fearless female journey before you became a healer, before you started to open up these doors of like awareness. Who were you before this happened? And then what made you get into the healing? Like, what was your your soul awakening per se?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a very, there's a very deep answer to that. So I lost my brother, and who was my only sibling and my best friend. And I also lost my husband, who's the father to my two children. And then after I lost my husband, I fell into the hands of a narcissist in a romantic relationship, and it was awful. It was just, and I'm the quintessential empath, as you can imagine. It's the narcissistic empath relationship is the biggest conundrum to most people, but I finally figured out why it happens so often. But there I was, in the midst of grief, and it was just very easy for a narcissist to come and swoop you up, And then I discovered that my best friend of 20 plus years was also a really horrible narcissist. And
oh my gosh,
all of my friends of 20 plus years betrayed me in like one foul swoop, like almost at my lowest point. I thought I was already at my lowest point when my friends of 20 plus years just literally turned their backs on me and just did awful things. I mean, just really awful things, like trying to prevent me from getting a job when I needed it to feed my two children,
Wow.
Bad stuff. And so, thank God I had the clarity to let them go very quickly. But, I found myself completely alone and at the lowest moment of my life. And I struggled really badly, clinical depression, severe anxiety and panic disorder, PTSD. I mean, you name it. I was a mess, an absolute mess. And because I was the only parent to my babies, I did everything, that I was supposed to do. I went to weekly therapy, biweekly counseling. I was in support groups. I was on loads of prescription medication for,
Mm.
multiple mood disorders, you name it. I don't even remember the diagnoses. There were so many. And, I was mentally ill.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I just felt so worthless as a human being that I tried to take my own life. I
Oh.
sat on the floor of my bedroom closet with a gun pointed against my head, begging God for the power to pull the trigger.
Mm.
Because I just didn't think, I thought, you know what, if my babies had a better mom, they'll also have the chance at a dad, and they're just going to be better off without me.
Mm.
And when I was on the floor with a very cold barrel pressed up against my temple, the gun went flying from my hand. Like it was almost as if like someone punched my shoulder, and I looked around and there was no one. And
Wow.
I heard 5 words out of the clear blue sky, and they were, Lisa, it's time to heal.
Mm.
And you would think that I would be like, who's there? What's going on? But I threw a fit. I threw a fit like a child
Yeah.
throwing a tantrum. I started banging my fists on the ground, kicking, screaming. And I said, what the fuck does that mean
Mm.
anyway? Because
Yeah.
I was like, well, don't tell me to heal. Oh, I mean, I have been doing everything in my power to heal my life. And so it just infuriated that whatever was talking to me at that time, that would, like, what does healing even mean? Right.
Yeah.
And at that moment, something went through my body. It was like something took over, and I sat up like in this very straight position. And I have never in my lifetime experienced that level of present moment awareness, where like literally there was nothing in the past. There was no future. And there was just this overwhelming sense of peace and love.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
It was, I get the chills every time I tell the story, because it was miraculous is what it was. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, it shouldn't be miraculous, but because of, unfortunately, the human condition, it was miraculous. And in that moment, I was almost like invited to ask again, what does healing really mean?
Yeah.
And from that moment, because I realized like I hadn't been healing, I'd been dealing
Yeah.
for decades. For
Yes.
decades, I had been dealing. And so from that moment on, I said, you know what? I will stop at nothing to answer that question. I will stop
Yeah.
at nothing to get the answer to that question. And, I very abruptly, and boldly, called my therapist and fired him. And like, just really like, I'm like, I'm going to get to the answer to this question, but, and it took some time. It really
Yeah.
took time. I mean, I found myself, quite literally writhing in moments of where I was writhing in pain, where like my
Mm.
heart literally, it felt as if it had already been shattered, and each and every single piece that it was broken apart had a vice grip on it.
Mm.
I physically, mentally, emotionally, it was the hardest thing that I ever did. And I wouldn't recommend what I did, like in the bold, abrupt nature of my healing journey. Don't recommend that to anyone, because it could have backfired, right? I mean, I threw
Yeah.
away literally every single piece of medication I threw away.
Wow.
I flushed it down the toilet. I stopped like cold turkey. Don't do that.
Mm-mm. Don't do that.
Do not do that. Consult your physician. I'm very lucky that I made it out alive. But I did. I mean, I really committed to it. And at first, I was so lonely. I
Mm.
was so lonely. It was unbelievable. But, eventually when I kept asking myself the question, what does healing really mean? The universe started to answer. It started to
Yeah.
deliver. My coffee table went from like Vogue, Vanity Fair, and Us Weekly to, like Greg Braden and Dante, and, like all of the great spiritual classics,
Yeah.
Hermetic law. I mean, like, so I like, you could, the evolution began. Of course, you don't see it when you're in it, but,
No.
my interest changed vastly, and I went from being really painfully lonely to alone. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, just alone.
Yeah.
And
I think
it
that's one of
wasn't,
the TikToks that resonated with me when you said, if you really want to go down your healing journey, know that you are going to lose everyone.
Mm.
And, I'm in that process where I'm losing friends and I'm losing family members because they don't understand what I'm talking about because it's not their normal, indoctrination speak, right?
Right.
It's not normal. Like they just don't understand because they haven't been curious to go down their healing journey. They're still stuck in their toxicity and their environment of what they believe is normal. And so that is true. You do eventually start losing friends, start losing, family members because you're no longer, I always say that some people are just like stuck in the darkness and now all of a sudden you're turning on the light and they're like, I don't like that. I don't want
Yeah.
the light. Like I like it dark. I like where I'm at. It feels comfortable and this is where I want to be, safe and comfortable in the darkness. But you're over here like, no, there's got to be an answer. Like you said, no matter what, you were still asking the question, what does healing look like? And I love that you said that the moment you kept asking that question, the universe answered.
Hmm.
And I think so
Yeah,
many
but
people think that they want like God to come in through the clouds and give you an audible, like, this is what you're supposed to do. Like you had that moment and you might have that moment like in the closet where you heard those words. But sometimes source, God, the divine talks to you through so many different modalities,
yeah.
like books,
Yeah, and
podcasts.
just to be clear, like I wasn't asking what does it look like because I could tell what healing looked like, right? Like I could sort of tell because there were people that were better, like more well than I was. But what I was really asking is, what does it mean? What does
Mm-hmm.
healing mean? Like what does it even mean? And if you look in the dictionary, it says to make whole. But I'm like, well, I'm not like yes, I'm broken, but like what does that even mean? What does it even mean to make whole? And so yeah, over the years, what I learned was that healing is transcendence. It's when
Mm,
you move your awareness beyond the level of your wounds, and as you move your awareness, you you begin to transcend the wound. But that is the ascension journey, right? Because it's
mm-hmm.
you are opening your awareness, and what's happening when you're opening your awareness is you're able to perceive more things beyond the limitations that the wounds may present for you.
Yeah.
So and then you start to look at the wounds very objectively, and there's something for when I do take on one-on-one clients in my healing work, which I don't so much anymore. I tend to work with people that are really ready to get in there, get in that
Mm-hmm.
dark night, and like admit that yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's really uncomfortable to admit. And so one of the things that some people who wouldn't appreciate my work don't appreciate when I say you know there's a reason, like there's
Mm-hmm.
a reason for your pain. And it's
Yeah.
so difficult to say because at the end of the day, if you really want to heal, okay, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that you have to realize is that you are the healer, period.
Mm.
It's not your
Yes.
doctors, it's not your therapist, it's not your bestie, it's not your mother and father, your coach or your counselor. It is you. Now, I'm not suggesting that those things are not co-creators in the healing
Mm-hmm.
process. But unless you're fully, totally, and completely willing to commit to the healing journey as the healer, it's very likely that you won't get very far. Right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't just turn your healing over to someone else because the healing, as within, so without. You've got to be able to take that supreme authority over the journey. And I always encourage people to take supreme authority over the journey, especially if they're working with coaches, counselors, therapists, and doctors, and ask those professionals, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Like I don't intend to sit in this chair or be in this pill bottle forever. Like what's the plan? And what
Yeah.
I've found is that there are certainly very good practitioners and doctors and healers
Therapists.
out there.
Yeah.
Yes, they exist, but I wouldn't say that they are that not all of them, not
Right.
all of them are good. So like that's one of the first things is like, okay, doc, first of all, like tell me what healing is so that I
Mm-hmm.
know what the path forward is. And I've actually worked with counselors and therapists. I have actually a good handful of doctors that I work with, but a lot of them can't say it like that. I mean, when I say it, they get it. I'm like, healing is transcendence. So as you move your awareness beyond the level of your wounds, you open your consciousness and you can perceive more beyond the wounds. And when you start perceiving more, you also shed light on the wound, and you can see why that wound existed for you as part of the soul's evolutionary journey, right?
Yeah.
So when I lost, I believe fully that I was destined to be paired with a sibling that would leave this planet early, right? And a spouse who would leave the planet early, so that I could know what it was like to be alone. And
Yes.
so understanding, so I went from alone and lonely to understanding all one, right? I'm a teacher of oneness. And I would have never been able to understand to the depth that I understand oneness, and to the experiences that I have had in oneness. I don't have them all the time, because it would be very difficult for me to operate in any sort of business or regular life if I did. But the experiences that I do have in oneness are full of miracles. I mean, they're
Yes.
full of miracles, and I would have never known that if I, if I hadn't experienced the losses that I experienced. And in regards to the abuse that I endured, the narcissistic abuse, I was deeply loved by my spouse and my late husband and my brother unconditionally. But I had to know what it was like to be unloved, so that I could learn to love myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I
love
would
that
have
you
never
said,
learned to love myself.
yeah, I love that you said earlier that sometimes people can't grasp the idea of like it happened for a reason. And especially like when you are processing grief and you just lost someone that you love and you adore, and somebody tells you like, oh, it all happened for a reason, or God has a plan. It's kind of like a sting. Like you don't, well, what's the plan? Because you're in so much pain and so much darkness. The pain of grief, I always say, is something that I would never wish on my worst enemy. Like no one, it's the worst pain in the world. And when you lose multiple people in your life, it's even more expanded, And so for me, like my healing journey started when my dad passed away. It's like when someone that is close to you leaves the earth, you're like, you start to ask these existential questions. Then why am I here? What's the purpose? What's this whole life? Because it's so like, until you experience death, you don't understand just how final it is, how it feels like that, even though we're energy and we never cease to exist. It just feels so final in that moment, especially if you're just not consciously aware. And I loved how you said too, that when we can process and transcend outside, it reminds me of the way you described it. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, I'm posting this also on YouTube so you could see her hand movements. But she was showing like you're stuck in this like darkness, but then you transcend above the pain and you can now have a better view of it. It reminds me of this because I'm really, really into near-death experiences. I researched them a lot, and I was listening to this guy, and he says that he wasn't like, he was an atheist. He didn't believe anything. So the first place that he went to was this dark forest. And in the forest, the tree branches of the dark forest, the tree that he was next to, like hugged him and like pressured him. And he's like, as I realized what the tree was really about, the tree was my fear, my bitterness, my anger, my shame, my guilt. And he was like, it's my own personal hell that I created from my own wounds, my own trauma, my own pain. And then he said, from a distance, I saw the light, and there was something within me that called me to the light. And the more that I tried to go to the light, the more that the tree hugged me harder. But he's like, I just continued and continued to reach for the light. And then I realized that I was transcending above the dark forest. And as I looked down, I saw all these other souls in their own personal hell of their own trauma and wounds and pain. And he's like, as I'm transcending up to the light, where love, light, and everything that is all amazing, he's like, I screamed down, go to the light, because he didn't want everyone to continue to suffer. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what we do. We create our own hell on earth with all the trauma and all the pain, and we don't know how to heal. Like you said earlier in the conversation, you were just dealing. You weren't really healing, you were dealing, because of the fact that we're taught to go to therapy, take this pill, drink this alcohol, eat this food, buy that bag, go on this trip, have sex with that guy. We're trying to find all these outside sources to heal the pain inside. And I love that you said, as within, so without, right? Is that how you said it? Where the kingdom really lies inside of you. The healing really lies inside of you, because we are all part of oneness, and we forget that.
Well, yeah, or you could say we don't remember that, right?
Oh, yes.
It is forgotten. But it's coming back. I mean, it's coming back, right? I don't know if you saw my post today, but I talked about, how, because one of my posts on one of my TikTok posts, I said, as one of the ways you can validate and verify that you are on an ascension path is that your bullshit meter just comes online, and you're like, oh my God, there's so much bullshit going on. And then simultaneously your tolerance for bullshit diminishes significantly. And this one girl asked me a question. She said, well, can you give us an example of bullshit? And I was like, oh yeah. And that was my post today. I was like, it's polarity. It's the divide. So it's everything between black and white, left and right. And it is the prolific amount of narcissism, manipulation, and gaslighting that we have on our planet, from our governments right into our family lives. I mean, we can't just always sort of, blame everything on a bureaucracy and a patriarchy, because in essence, we're responsible too, right? So, and I said, what's not bullshit is, forgiveness, compassion, honesty, truth. It's unity, not divide, right?
Yes.
That's what's true. So, but yeah, I think one of the things, if anyone's listening to this and they want some tips on healing, one of the incentives to heal, right, is that healing and manifesting are the exact same thing. We have this humongous new age wave of, manifesting, I'm in alignment, I'm this, that, when in reality, especially as an energy healer who can see auras, right? When I do my work, I can see into the chakras. And so I'm like, the amount of density that individual is holding in her energy body, this is all just semantics, this language that people are spewing out, because the truth is that consciousness creates, right? And if in your consciousness are a bunch of wounds, that means there's a lot of density, which means there's a lot of resistance, right? So if there's density in the auric field, there's less light, right? There's less light and less ability to actually manifest what you desire. So part of the healing / manifesting journey is to master the art of surrender. And surrender is not what a lot of Joe Dispenza talks about surrender, and it's so woo. I'm like, oh, you're killing it for us. Not that I don't not that I don't like Joe Dispenza. It's just that it's like, come on, guys, let's be really accountable for what we say, because we're misleading people. It's not. I always say, don't over romanticize it, and don't make it more complicated than it is either. But the art of surrender, what that really is an ability to take the high self-witness observer position. And in the high self-witness observer position, you transcend the ego, right? And the ego is the part of us that labels and judges things.
Yes.
So when we can achieve true surrender, we are in a high self-witness observer position, looking at the overall experience. And in that position, we can just discern whether or not our consciousness is flowing toward love or toward fear.
Yes.
Right? So if we're thinking to ourselves, I'll never meet someone, I'll never get married, I'll never have enough money, or, screw that guy, I'm not forgiving him, or, I hate my boss, my kids are driving me crazy. It's pretty easy to realize that is fear-based consciousness, right? It's that's flowing toward fear. But when you can, in that place of recognizing what is love, what is fear, you have the ability to shift your consciousness toward love, right? And it's when you intentionally take supreme authority over your consciousness by steering it toward love, that's when you heal. That's when you begin to transcend the wounds, because you understand how powerful you are.
Yes. Right? I think a lot of people forget how powerful we are. A lot of people I talk about how we come from pure source, right? Before we came into this beautiful planet, we were with pure source and pure light, which is God, source, the divine, the great I am, whatever you want to call it. And then we come into this world and we're still pure source and pure light. Like you look at a baby and it is pure source, pure light, pure love, trust. But then as you get older, that trust starts to be broken, because either your mom or your dad or your siblings or whoever your caretaker like broke that trust in whatever part of your life, or you get disappointed or someone hurts you or someone makes fun of you. And then all of a sudden your pure love and your pure light starts to diminish. And then if you really experience something traumatic, like losing a loved one or in a toxic narcissistic relationship, they're like almost trying to like smother your light to the point where it's just like little baby embers. And I do love that you said coaches are your co-creators, because I'm a coach and I always tell people when my clients tell me, oh, you saved me or you helped me. And I didn't help you. I just blew into your embers and turned your fire on. And now it's your responsibility to go and help someone else, because I do believe that we can light each other up, our souls up, and turn us on and like do the work. I love that you said the next dimension is going to be all these spiritual healers and light workers and people who are going to have just a different renaissance, right? I love that. But like you said, I do want to talk about how we do need to make money doing this.
Yeah.
Right? We do need to make money doing this.
This is the thing I see with light workers right now. And a light worker is just basically someone who came to Earth to raise the consciousness of the planet. And typically when we incarnate into the third dimension, in order for us to understand our work, we go through a very painful process, because otherwise, if we didn't go through that pain, we wouldn't know what we're healing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what's so frustrating about being a light worker. And a light worker takes many shapes and many forms. I mean, they can be doctors and therapists. They can be astrologers and Reiki masters. They can be, a mother or a child. It doesn't matter. And in fact, we're all light workers in some regard, because we are light and we are consciousness creating. So we are using our light to work the experience. But some people aren't as committed to the process as you and I are, right? And our communities are. But we're seeing the need for more and more healers, particularly with our world shifting rapidly. And we are at this, very sort of tenuous place in the evolution of humanity, where the systems and the third dimensional systems and structures are coming down, and that is part of the evolutionary process. They have to come down, or otherwise we can't ascend. We can't keep going to the fifth dimension, because the third dimensional paradigm has us trapped in the systems and structures in order to control our consciousness, right?
Yes.
So those have to come down. And the systems and structures are everything from our medical system to our education system, our financial system. And you see some people are like, well, they're not coming down. I'm like, yeah, they are. I mean, there wouldn't be Bitcoin, there wouldn't be cryptocurrency if things weren't, dismantling. But now will the government take control over it? They're going to try, because they want the third dimensional paradigm to survive. Right. So just like COVID, I mean, it was, from my perspective, it was just, it was just another flu. Right. It was a very bad flu, but it was another flu. I mean, we didn't have to rip out vaccinations from our backside and start poking everybody, because with absolutely no, efficacy whatsoever. Like, that's ridiculous. That was, the whole thing was just absolutely ridiculous. But now everything's like, there's so much coming on, like all of this disclosure is coming out, like, oh my gosh, like who knew that, the CDC was owned by this person and all of these people have stock in that. And you're like, oh God, so this is all being exposed. And that's why more and more of us are coming through the cracks being like, okay, well, what's my work? Right. And I think what's one of the things that I really wanted to mention, particularly if there are light workers who are in business, is that the soul's urge to emerge into the physical experience is very real. And it can be a little painful, right? Because the reason soul wants to come through into the physical experience, because it knows it has purpose.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's when we say soul purpose, like my soul purpose is to be a rock star, right? Or to be whatever, but actually it's much deeper than that. It's not it's the third dimensional egoic mental faculty that immediately, as soon as the soul begins to emerge, it immediately slaps a label and judgment on it. Meaning, like, in order for the soul to emerge through, the ego has to say, okay, well, then this is what you do. You do astrology, you do coaching, you do healing, like energy healing work, right? And that's the ego saying, like, this is what you do, And I think from a, if it really brings that person joy, then that's a wonderful thing. But I think what I end up seeing quite a bit is that healers don't actually know what they do. Right. And that's really problematic, that they don't know what they do. And they're not coming to, like, the other day I watched this girl on TikTok and she said, like, if you're a healer, I will stop your account because I'm so adamant about helping healers build sustainable businesses, because we cannot fail.
Yeah.
We can't fail. And she's talking about, like, like, I don't normally work with men because soul alignment is different for men. And I'm going, what is soul alignment? What is soul alignment, honey? Come on. Tell me. I'm like waiting for it. I'm looking through every one of her posts. I'm like, nobody, you can clearly tell that you're not thriving in your practice because nobody knows what soul alignment is. Like, and the thing that we have to remember is that until we become absolutely crystal clear about how we work with an individual or groups of individuals, they won't know what we do.
Yes.
Right? They don't know what we do. I mean, if you say I'm a Reiki master, nobody cares if you're a Reiki master.
Even when I say I'm a life coach, they don't know what I do. I had one client who she wanted therapy sessions. I'm like, I'm not a therapist. Like, we don't talk about your past here. Like, I if you want to, I have a perfect therapist you can talk to, but I'm not about, like, talking about the past. I'm talking about, like, what you want to create in the future. Like, let's talk about the programs that are running you and figure out how to unprogram yourself. And then let's move on to the future. But she wanted to continue to talk about the past. I'm like, lady, I'm not a therapist. Like, I'm not licensed for this. So people just have this weird, they don't know. I just was on a mastermind the other day and they're like, you can say you're a life coach or spiritual mentor, but what's your real magic? Like, what's the magic that you really provide? And I was like, oh, that's better. That's a better way of saying it. Right.
Yeah. Because even if you say, like all the reprogramming fad is out there too. And it's like, but what does that even mean? So like, I was working with a mindset coach last week and I said, tell me what you do. And he said, well, I'm a mindset coach. And I said, okay, well, what happens when I work with you? I help you manifest your dreams and reprogram your subconscious mind. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, and I get where he's coming from. Yeah.
But I was like, person who hasn't read the books or hasn't been in that realm, they don't know what reprogramming means or subconscious mind or any of that stuff. Yes, I understand.
And the other part is that everybody's talking about that. So by the end of our work together in that session, we came up with, I help recently divorced men recover their abundant mindset so that they can recover their losses after divorce. Right. So I'm like, there is what you do. Now, when you go out and speak to people, that's what you do. And that is what is going to make people stand out. So like, if you told me, like, I'm an astrologer, and I was like, well, okay, well, what do you do as an astrologer? Well, I do natal charts. I'm like, who cares? I can go to any astrologer and get a natal chart reading. Who cares? So, but if you told me that I'm an astrologer who helps women, let's say, I want to give you a good one. I'm an astrologer who helps women who have been in toxic and painful relationships uncover relationship karma in their natal chart so that they can rewrite their karmic contracts and find happy, healthy relationships that thrive. Now I know what you do.
Yes.
And then when we start to speak like that, what ends up happening, and I'm giving for any listeners who are digging what I'm putting down here, I'm going to give I just created a Facebook group called Astronomical Abundance for Healers and Spiritual Business Owners. And I'm going to give a free training in that members area in the coming days to help people clear their money blocks, business money blocks. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about is the 3 C's. And that really is getting crystal clear, like I just read that off for an astrologer, communicating that
Yeah.
in a crystal clear way, and then also starting to close sales on that archetype, right? On the what I do, on the transformation that you're going to drive, because that ultimately becomes the confidence, and confidence breeds clients, right? When you start speaking to
Yes.
exactly what you do, people are like, oh,
Thank you again for listening
and the
to
beauty of it too
Journey of a
is you
Fearless
filter out all
Female.
the junk
I'm your host,
that,
Payla
the
Rosser.
people that are just there to like,
If you're looking for a life coach or a
scroll and waste
spiritual
their time,
mentor,
you start
you
to
can
actually
book a
speak
free
to
discovery
people.
call with
It's
me
that
at
1,000 true fan idea. Whereas like if
www.fearlessfemale.com.
you
You can
actually
also
start to
follow me
speak
on
to people
Instagram
about what
at
you genuinely do,
fearlessfemale_coach.
you will have clients
Subscribe to my
lining up at your
YouTube
door.
channel at
Yes.
Fearless Female,
Yeah.
or find me
I
on
love that.
TikTok.
I love that
I'm
because
under
there's
at
especially me too.
Payla.Rosser.
There's a lot
And
of
if you love this
spiritual
episode, make sure
healers
you hit
out there
subscribe.
and
Share
light
it with your
workers
friends
and
and
Reiki
leave a
masters
review.
that are
I
just
read
like,
every
oh,
single
I don't need
review,
the
and I truly
money, or
appreciate the time you
I'll
spend
just do it
writing
for
it.
free, or it's okay, like I won't charge you that much, or they're giving discounts, or and it's like, but we can't help the masses if we don't have the money. And that's the thing, money does equal freedom of choice to be able to help and multiply what it is that you do. So we need to take away that whole idea that money is the root of all evil, and that now we're becoming like corporate America too. And, you should be giving away this stuff for free. Like, no, we have, the ability to do these things, and we should be paid for our gifts and the time. Like, you spent time doing the hard work, the research and all the stuff. Like, I've spent time doing the hard work and the research and going to the conferences and learning from other people and gathering the information so that I can help you not have to spend years doing that. So, right. And so like there's value in that. Well, the other thing is that what healers, I think, really, there's two things that they don't understand. The first is that income is directly related to impact. And if we are truly going to have impact and ultimately influence over the manifest reality, we need income. Mm-hmm. And I know the second thing is that a lot of healers are like, well, like money is so 3D, and, in 5D, there won't even be a need for money. And I'm just transcending, and that's what I want to do. Well, the thing is that your client is in 3D, which means you have to operate in the third dimensional realm when you're working with your client. So even if you're astral projecting at night, or you're, taking walks with the fairies or the elementals, like, I mean it. Like, I really mean it. Like, even if you're doing that, for you to obtain more clients in this dimension, this third dimension that we're, going back and forth in now, you need money. Mm-hmm. And you can't sustain a business without money. And sustaining a business is not like working paycheck to paycheck. Sustaining a business is, making sure that you have the appropriate systems and the appropriate business structure and the appropriate avenues to get your message out there, so that you can continue to make greater and greater impact, and ultimately so that all of us collectively can have greater and greater influence. Yes. See, when we cheap out in this space in between the third and the fifth dimension, and we're like, well, we're not going to participate in 3D, but we have to participate in 3D if we want to lift humanity to 5D. Yeah. And that's just so important. And the money piece, there's so much money trauma with people that are spiritual. And it's like, I want to just be like, dude, like, get over it. Like, get over it. Plus, look at it this way. When we start controlling the money, right? when we have enough of it, we start to control it. And then we decide what it means, what it is as an instrument, right? What form it takes. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to say, okay, like, give me more. Give me more. Let me earn as much as I possibly can, so that I can continue my work, so I can sustain my work, scale my work, and ultimately be that force that is going to, with other light workers, lead the path to illuminate the dawn of the fifth dimension. Like, that's why we're here, right? Yeah. And so that is the reason why you decided to stop being the healer and start being the coach for healers. Is that what made you decide, like, okay, I really need to switch? Yeah, well, I think, part of it was that, like, I had built a very successful healing practice, and I was looking at all of these healers, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't good, because I could tell, when I say I stalk their accounts, I could tell that they're very good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
but they're not operating in sustainable businesses because they're not clear enough, they're not communicating well enough, they don't have systems and structures, they have they're not pouring the foundation they need to grow upon, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
rooted, they have no roots. They're all just like, hey, Venmo, cash at me. I'm like, no, like, no, let's not do that. Let's be in business together.
Yeah.
And over my own personal ascension journey, I have expanded my consciousness to a point where I've become an intuitive channel, and I channel a group of energy entities, whatever you want to call them, that I call our beloved ascension support team. So I get these messages that come through, and it was very painful for me, because when I first started channeling them, it was a huge challenge, the channeling,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, what's going on? Like, am I just losing my mind, or are you people like, or whatever
Yeah.
is
Can you
are
tell
these
us
is
about
it,
that time when you first heard them, or like, can you tell us about that moment? Where were you? And like,
mm-hmm. So I was in my kitchen, and my kitchen is like right over there. So my office is right next to my kitchen. And I was in my kitchen, and I was about to come back to my office, and I had this like it was like almost like a panic attack, where I was like, I have to go meditate. I have to go meditate. It was like, something like, I'm like, how's someone supposed to meditate in this state? I'm like, what's going on? Like I had this like really bizarre moment. So I sat down in meditation. I started to breathe. And then I started to see color coming through the crown chakra, like internally in the awareness. And that color started to take shape and form. And eventually I started to hear words, but it
Mm.
didn't come in like, hi, Lisa, how are you today?
Yeah.
Like it was bits and pieces. And over time, because I can communicate back. I mean, sometimes not so well, sometimes well.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him, like, why are you here? Like, why me? And they told me that I had a very strong ability to communicate with my throat chakra, and that I could take very complex ascension concepts and put them into relatable language for people in the third dimensional realm. And
Mm.
that is really, like, I think that's relatively evident on my my ascension guide, Lisa Roulette, not my business page, but I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, that's how I've grown to almost 300,000 followers, because I take those complex subjects, and I can break them down and help people to relate to them. Sometimes, like when they're here or with me, it's not clear, but they made it very clear early on that if I don't understand something, I am not to speak to it,
Mm.
because that is a responsibility that I have taken extremely seriously, because I see people all over social media who are the worst representation of what it truly means to be in a leadership position in the spiritual community.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's this one girl who she's, I don't know, she's in her early 20s. And someone told me to go to her account, because it was someone that wanted me to do work for them, like, like creator work. And
Mm-hmm.
they said, well, go to her account, because, this and that and the other thing. I went to her account, and I was like, and it's all about how to get your ex back in 5 steps. And I downloaded a $16 PDF from her link in bio. And I was like, I was overwhelmingly like shocked at like how I was like, what is this? Like, she's having people
Yeah.
burn money for like nothing.
Wow.
And it was like a manifestation journal. It was 3 pages, and it was like maybe 25 words, like $16, and which thankfully is nothing to me.
Yeah.
But like to people who are like the million people that are like watching her, obsessing over her ridiculous nature.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just sort of like a thing. Like, I really hold myself to a very high level of integrity and standards when it comes to my work, from both the being a healing coach and a coach to healers. Like, I don't mess around.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely adore you.
Thank you.
And I'm so thankful that you took the time out of your day to talk to me
Oh,
and just to
yeah.
like talk to my audience. So, as we wrap up this episode, what would be your nugget of wisdom for anyone who is listening right now?
I think to remember that healing and manifesting are the exact same thing, right? Because once you begin to heal, you begin to transcend and you ascend your awareness, and that opens, and I call them the horse blinders come off, and you start to see, right? You start to see all
Mhm.
of the potential that you can co-create with. And then the other thing, if you are a light worker or a healer and you do have a business, I would say build it with integrity so that it can be sustained, because our work is the most important work at this time.
Oh, beautifully said. Thank you for being on the podcast. How can my
Thank
audience
you.
find you?
LisaRoulette.com is my email. And on TikTok, I'm Lisa Roulette everywhere on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. And then for the business aspect, on TikTok, I'm Lisa Roulette underscore, or Lisa underscore Roulette underscore business. So
Perfect.
yeah. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.